Welcome to this demonstration of hybrid cloud transformation and integration for VMware vSphere, VMware Cloud Foundation with Cohesity's data platform.
Here's what I'm going to demonstrate. So think about, we have a corporate mandate, corporate data management policies, which have to adhere to a certain level of protection, retention, and also replication. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to, in one single procedure, in one function, in one policy, I'm going to enable what you logically see here. The replication of the same type of data and information from my data center, my core, out to a particular cloud or an edge to utilize each one of those use cases that are supported, regardless of whether it be AWS or EC2. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to show you how this stuff is created before we kind of sort of, create it. So let me just showcase some of the things that I have available here, and I'll walk you through this sort of procedure. So here I have three different clusters. One, which is obviously placed and deployed on AWS. You can see here at Punching Clouds, AWS. Here are the three instances that are running in the AWS EC2 environment. These three nodes make up this particular cluster here. Now I want to show you the other cluster, which is actually running on Microsoft Azure. Here's the actual by name, as you can see it here. Now let me show you within the Microsoft Azure dashboard what this actually looks like, which in this particular case, this deployment is one instance, one actual appliance, whereas the one in AWS was three. The reason for that is, storage availability and service level agreements based on availability, which, not important now, but I'll showcase some other time. The point is that, look, I have three clusters individually in three different places: my private cluster, my Azure cluster, and my AWS cluster. So here I'm going to show you the policy manager, what this policy that I'm sort of presenting is going to do. So if you take a look at here, I have local protection, I have replication to Azure, and I have replication to AWS, but at the same time, I have data retention to Azure and data retention to AWS. All of these functions and capabilities, which traditionally will be handled and managed by different systems, different functions, different operations, different potential different people, are going to be managed as a systematic function, executed once, performed once, for one single task, which will guarantee and eliminate the risk from the infrastructure because we're able to guarantee that the archival for data protection, long-term retention, and for BCDR purposes, we have data replicated to two different public clouds so that we can have a certain level of availability regardless of what happens to each one of those clouds, and we can reduce the potential outage. So there, I clicked on the actual name of the job, which is called Local Protection and Multi-Cloud Retention Replication. And you can see here there's already 4 different types of virtual machines that are running there. I want to actually show the settings by showcasing the number of virtual machines, because I'm going to launch this process to show how simple it is to maintain this sort of hybrid model and this capability. So here the job has run effectively and has been successful. Here you can see the replication task, the archival task to AWS, the other archival task to Azure, and then the replication to Azure in this particular case. So in typical fashion, you would think that I'm going to go and set up this from my UI. Everyone wants to have a simple, centralized, single pane of glass UI, but again, we're just making another problem, making the problem of the single pane of glass and extending it. Let's do this in the way in which this is traditionally done from a vSphere perspective, and let's do it from one instance from the service catalog, which would be from vRealize automation, which could come from a VMware Cloud Foundation instance or a traditional vSphere deployment model. So here I went to my service catalog. I choose the particular blueprint that I want to deploy, and notice that here I have the job that I want to create, that I want to tie or assign to this particular blueprint or instance that I'm going to deploy. Once the instance is deployed, we can very quickly see or track the request here. I'm obviously going to follow the request and speed it up here a little bit because this actually takes a little bit of time. And you can see once the job is successful, it became part of the day sort of one operation and not a post type of function. So now that the job is completely performed and the VM has been deployed, obviously here's the name app VMCTO002. Let me validate that that's been deployed effectively within the vSphere infrastructure. And you can actually see that once I get to this directory, I find it. But the important thing here is this. So yeah, it was deployed in vSphere. Now I want to know that it was actually added to the way in which I'm going to manage the data in this particular hybrid model. So let me look into the actual job itself, as you can see here. By looking into the settings and the details of this particular job, I should now be able to see that this new virtual machine that I just deployed, that new application, is part of this job already. And as you can see it here, there it is, which means that the next time this entire function of operations will run, the protection, the archival, the replication, and all of that to the different clouds, that one virtual machine will be part of that job. So we obviously be compliant and be safe in terms of being able to do that. Now, that was done directly from the vSphere vRealize automation. Not everybody uses vRealize automation. Maybe the way in which you consume and manage the infrastructure is directly from the good old vSphere client. So we should also be able to do that effectively from here as well. And look how simple this is. So when the concerns come about, the complexity, the interoperability, we are basically overcoming that and enabling this sort of value so that you can actually ease the operational procedures and mitigate risks. So here, directly from within the vSphere client, forget going to my client, to the Cohesity client. That's not where you consume or manage the infrastructure. The point about interoperability is to be able to live or come into your management component, your service catalog, your management console, and deliver the value that we do by leveraging our APIs. And here, directly from vSphere, now I'm going to add two different types of virtual machines to that same particular job, and you have the ability to say run it now or schedule it at any point in time that suits the task that is being performed. I'm going to perform it now, and I would expect that the minute I hit yes, those two new virtual machines, once this workflow is completed, will now also be added to that one particular job, which takes care of my corporate policy for data retention, protection and recovery, and disaster recovery and archival as well. And once I come back here and I look at it, you'll see very quickly that the job hasn't yet run. But if I look at the settings, I now come once again and identify or show the number of virtual machines. You can very quickly here see the two virtual machines that I added from the vSphere web client. Now talk about integration and interoperability. Now we have the ability like no one else has or that I've seen before, where I can do this from any of the components or the management components provided by vSphere today, whether it's vRealize automation or directly from the vSphere web client, right? That's a notion, that's a sense of proper operations, mitigating risk, and keeping things somewhat compliant here. And here's the job actually now running. So now the fact that this job is going to execute and it's going to run, obviously here it ran and it was successful. Notice that all the virtual machines, all the applications that were added were successfully protected, right? But now if I check on the replication task itself, you can see that as part of that one job, all the machines were replicated. They were successful as one function. So now you don't have to worry about performing these procedures to different clouds as different tasks and different functions. So let me go validate in the cluster out in AWS. You'll notice that the job is here. It's inactive because it doesn't run from here. It only receives. Here you have the same amount of virtual machine and applications there. I can do the same with the cluster on Azure and actually show you here the protection. The same concept is applicable here. There's the same job, which is automatically replicated. All the same applications and virtual machines are available there. This is also applicable in the event that you were protecting and sharing file services and abstractions. It will be the same concept. Now here, lastly, we'll look at the archival process. You can see that data was archived and will be retained based on that demonstration or those requirements that I actually mentioned before. So the point is that here is how I validated that the archival took place. I went into my Microsoft Azure blob, and I see actually where the data is being actually archived. You can see those components there. I can do the same by going to the S3 environment within AWS. And obviously everything is actually corrected and done very effectively there. So just imagine and just look at how the integration, interoperability, operating procedures is when it comes to consuming the infrastructure in this way. And here to give you a bit of tech preview, here's how you further expand upon, monitoring the behavior and consumption of the infrastructure from a Cohesity standpoint by looking at it through the tool that you utilize within the VMware infrastructure to look at operations and management, right? Here we have our management pack with vRealize operations, where you can actually see and track the performance of the jobs, the applicability of what's going on, whether the jobs failed, and anything you want to look at, looking at not just the on-prem instance or the on-prem cluster, but also having the ability to look at the clusters which are placed in the public clouds, in AWS, as well as Azure. So there's a lot of information here. You can see the correlation. So obviously the whole point is that how can we bring the same operating model and procedure that we did in the traditional on-prem private data center to extend it into this hybrid model? When it comes to vSphere and utilizing some of the components that you have, this is what's going to make the sort of the control plane from a management perspective, expand across different clouds, where from a vSphere infrastructure perspective, there's nothing different, right? And Cohesity very much enables that by managing the data, the consumption, the mobility, the placement, the replication, the long-term retention, and recoverability capabilities that are not really available in many products today, right? This sort of integration, this capability, as you can see here, it's second to none. So obviously, when I say that this is one of the sort of the best ways to potentially have any vSphere customer, an organization, make the transformation completely to this particular model, we make it a lot easier. As you can see here, we keep everything on the vSphere side so that you don't have to leave the management component of the vSphere infrastructure and sort of get to that particular point.
And that's about it. I hope you enjoyed the demo, and thank you for watching.